All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Beginning another day in learning Torah with the hope that this will tilt the scales and bring Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be big changes in the nature of man, and people will be more kind and more honest, etc., because they'll have a reason to. But one of the things that'll hasten that um, great healing of the world is giving charity. So let's give charity. Here we have a charity box, and charity saves from all bad things. There we go. And also charity brings the geula, brings all good things. Charity. Okay. So we're continuing what we learned yesterday. What we learned yesterday in this book called Torah Or, which is written a compilation of speeches, discourses that were given by the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Shner Zalman, that he wrote the Tanya and also the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch is a law book telling you what to do. And both of them are very, very exact and very correct. So here we're talking about what exactly Abraham did. Now, Abraham was the first Jew. And when did he officially really become a Jew? When did God make this covenant with him that he became a Jew? Was when he was circumcised. When he was circumcised, let me just change this thing. Let me just see this, how this works here. I just want to look at the audio settings. Yeah, that's good. When he was circumcised, so that's when his name also got changed. His name got changed, and then he became the first Jew. So if you look in the Torah, it doesn't really explain very much about what that means. Why? So he got his name changed. So what? Why is it such a big, major thing? And what does it mean? People change their names all the time. And why did it have to do with circumcising himself? Circumcise himself. Huh? He said he was 99 years old. God said, circumcise yourself, and then you're going to get the big prize. You're going to get your name changed. So you think Abraham would say, listen, just change my name, call me whatever you want to. And enough, what do I have to make this operation? He's 99 years old. It's not a simple operation, even for a 8-year-old child. It's not a simple operation. It's not a simple thing. I mean, the Mohalim, the religious Jews have been circumcising their children since the time of Abraham. And the people who do it, it's a very simple process. I mean, it just takes a couple of seconds, actually. But in fact, it's not so simple. You have to wait until 8 days, for instance. One of the reasons until 8 days, I mean, of course, the main reason it says in the Torah, but it happens to be that after 8 days, the child is not in a danger anymore. And then it'll heal. And before that is in danger. So the whole situation is dangerous. So Abraham, especially an older person, it's a massive thing. Like I said, yesterday, I've seen it done on older Jews. So, why did God tell him to do that? What's it got to do? And interestingly enough, Jews, even non-religious Jews, the maybe the exception. Excuse me, one second. Non-religious, the minor exception is in Israel. There were some on the kibbutz, like the far left, whatever, and they refused to circumcise their children. They said, we're not going to have anything to do with it. I even know people that are like that, Israelis, that they refuse to circumcise their children. And in Russia, the government, suppressed Jewish identity and especially Jewish learning of Torah to the degree that parents did not circumcise their children. They didn't circumcise their children. And now that's coming back, so they do circumcise their children. But interestingly enough, Jews are self-sacrificing to circumcise their children, their beloved children, a baby boy, 8 days old, and they care about him and they love him, and they circumcise him. And a lot of them are even non-religious, but they circumcise their children. And this has been going on for the last since the time of Abraham, and certainly since the time of the Torah. The Torah was given. The Jews So Jews have been circumcised. So well, what's the point? That's Jewish identity. Jewish identity is circumcised, and his name was changed. That was it. I mean, don't misunderstand this. A Jew that's not circumcised is still a Jew. He certainly is a Jew, but he's lacking the expression of it outward. So, what is that expression of a Jew? So that's what this is talking about. That's what this is talking about. So, ideally, what is a Jew? What really is a Jew? The Jews are chosen by God. God chose Abraham. God chose them. What did he choose him for? What did they choose him for? So the answer is the Jews are chosen to tell the world how much God loves them. Each and every human being is being created by God personally, individually, constantly, every instant, intentionally. Every human being. And every human being is different. And this is from God's love. God's love. And when people think about this, so they'll realize that this love is only the beginning of the picture. That God creates them. Something even more valuable that God gives to each human being, and that is responsibility. That every human being is responsible for his surroundings, his family, for the whole world, basically. To make what do you mean responsible? To make the right choices. Okay, but that's the job of the Jews. The Jews are supposed to, some people say the Jews are called the conscience of the world. The Jews are supposed to tell everybody what's right and wrong and encourage everyone to do what's right from love. What's right is what God says is right. And because we love God, why should you love God? Because he's creating you and he's enlivening you, not just sitting up in the sky, like all the other religions say. And that's what the Jews are here to do, to educate the world. Okay. To get everyone to feel this love of God, everyone. So you have to remove a lot of nature because nature gets in the way. Nature gets in the way. A person, and God created us to be egotistical, so you have to remove that nature. It's like a person, let's say he's addicted to gambling or addicted to whatever is to alcohol. So that gets in his way. Everywhere he goes, he just looks for a chance to gamble or to take a drink or something. So it's very difficult for him to love his family, to be honest in his job, and to be a nice person, a kind person, because he's always thinking about himself. That selfishness that he has, which takes its form in alcohol or whatever it is, it becomes a big veil. It becomes a veil that separates himself from reality. So removing this veil, that's basically the job of the Jewish people. The veil of nature. Now, God created this veil. God wants there to be nature. And he wants it to hide over the truth. And he wants us to remove it. That's the whole story of Adam, right? God creates man, puts him in Gan Eden and says, see that tree over there? Don't eat from that tree. Why don't create the tree in the first place? You don't want any problems. What do you mean don't even? Right? Don't eat that tree. So I mean, even just from curiosity, you'd come to eat from the tree. Why shouldn't? What's wrong about eating that tree? I wonder what's wrong with it. So that the God put man in the world, and he purposely made a concealment. He purposely put this tree, if you want to call it the fruit, the forbidden fruit in the world, and he also put inside of man an inclination to eat from this fruit. And what's the fruit? False egotism. False egotism. And that's what brings all of the depression and the aggression and the addictions and all the terrible things in the world are false egotism. A person basically thinking that he's God. He, she, whatever. Okay, so that's the job of Abraham. And God signified this by giving him the bris milah, the circumcision, to remove the foreskin, to remove nature, to remove the extra part of nature. Right? It wasn't telling him to remove the whole organ of procreation, that sex is bad And that he's not saying that sex is very good. If it wasn't for sex, nobody would be here. We wouldn't be alive. It's a very good thing, but it has to be done properly without false egotism. It has to be done in the way God wants, and that's everything, not just the sexual relationships, everything in the world. I mean, everything in the world is basically, I mean, I'm not trying to be Freudian over here, but it's a sexual relationship. What is bisexual? What's a sexual relationship? It's a unification of two opposites, if you want to call it. So in a way, we are the opposite of the world. We feel ourselves, and the world, we're intimate with ourselves. I feel myself, and I don't feel the world as much. So unification with me and the world, that's a relationship. All of Kabbalah is based on this idea of male and female. And we see in our prayers, God is always called masculine. Right? Why is God masculine? Something, what is it called? What is it? Misogynistic? What is it? No, the masculine is the giving aspect, and feminine is the receiving aspect. And the job of Abraham was that there should be more revelation of God, and that the world should be more able to receive it. And that's why God added a letter Hey to Abraham's name. We're going to get to that. Okay, ready? Let's go. So now the Rebbe is saying, this is not so simple. We're talking about revealing levels of reality. Once the Rebbe gave a speech, one of the Rebbe's speeches, he asked the question, why is it that we go to sleep? Right? Everybody goes to sleep. You sleep, a good portion of the day, you're asleep. Right? Some people, 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day, 5 hours a day, but you're asleep. When you're asleep, the only real benefit you get from being asleep is that it refreshes you. Right? You rest up. So but when you're asleep, you're like, 60%, not 90% dead. You're dead. Huh? You're dead. When you're asleep, you're dead. You could have all your possessions in your room and somebody can come and steal. And you don't even know. It's like you're dead. Right? So what's the good? Man is created in order to serve God, in order to make the right choices. When you're asleep, you can't make any choices. You don't. So at first glance, this is a totally unnecessary aspect of life, is going to sleep. And we even have our special room where you go into, like the sleep room, your bedroom. You go in the room and you die. Like every night, it's a death room. You go in there, you die. Why go to sleep? So it should be that instead of living, let's say a person lives 120 years, and he sleeps 1/3 of that time. Excuse me. And he sleeps 1/3 of that time, or he sleeps for. So instead, it should be that a person lives 80 years, and 40 years he doesn't live. Instead of sleeping, so you just shorten his life. He'll live constantly and he'll always be fresh. And you're not missing anything. What are you missing? Maybe the mattress people might lose out, but except for that, the Rebbe said no. The point of going to sleep and waking up is that when you're asleep, you think that it's real. And when you wake up, you realize that what you thought was real is not really real. It was just a dream. So the same thing is that in this world, a person might come to say, listen, maybe when I was asleep, I was so sure that it was real. I got scared and I was laughing at jokes, and then all of a sudden a giraffe turns into be the $5 bill, and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world, and I woke up laughing. And I saw these stupid, ridiculous things, and I took everything for serious. And I thought, and suddenly I woke up and I realized that the whole thing isn't even worth remembering. It was just a bunch of, hodgepodge. Well, the same thing is maybe right now. Maybe right now we're just sort of like sleeping, and we're just misunderstanding everything and taking things serious that aren't supposed to be taken serious. And we have false goals and false identity and false this. And maybe Mashiach will come in and wake us up, which is the truth. Is the truth. So this waking up from one level, this is like removing a veil. It's like a level of more clearer truth. Oh, so that was the job of Abraham. Abraham's job was to remove the divisions between holy godliness and the world. Says the Rebbe, but there's a lot of other different levels of divisions, even in the world, that separates. There's all Bechina Sha'omer, like it says on Motzi Shabbos, after Shabbat. Excuse me 1 minute. Like it says, when we finish Shabbat, now Shabbat is holy. And when we leave Shabbat, we make Havdalah, Mavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. We separate between holy and mundane. This is a Mosek Mavdil Gamor. This is a complete division. Something like we had in between the holy temple and the world. The Enodom, it's not something like the same thing like a division between Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim. We said there was the room where the ark was in the holy temple. That was called Holy of Holies. And then there was the room right before that where there was the candelabra and the incense altar. That was called holy. So there was the holy and the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was where the ark was. Only the high priest would go in there once a year. Only he could go in, and he could only go in once a year for a very short time on Yom Kippur. And there was a veil between them. It says this was a veil between two levels of holiness, holy and Holy of Holies. And says that's one type of a division. That's what we talked about previously. But now we're talking about a division between holy and mundane. This from one level of holiness to another. This is like the chain of creation and the light itself it became more and more physical. And after this parsa, after the separation between holy and Holy of Holies, so you take the Holy of Holies, you make up a separation, and things are still holy, right? Like we say on Yom Tov, we say Kodesh the Kodesh. When Yom Tov and there's Chol Hamoed, the intermediate days, so we also make Havdalah between holy and between, I said, one level of holiness and another level of holiness, which is not the case between holiness and mundane. This is a masach, this is a concealment which conceals totally until it makes nasa nifrad, until it's separate totally. Like the external worlds that elevate themselves to say, Li Yo'uri, the river is mine and I created me. So again, God creates everything. So you might have a question, and 1 second, God creates everything. That's a little bit, that's overboard. That's overboard. You can't, God creates everything. You want to tell me that God creates Hitler? God creates Stalin? Huh? God creates all these evil things? And he says, yeah, that's right. God creates everything. There's nothing else except for God. There are even religions that say that there's two gods. There's the God of good, the God of bad, the God of light, the God of darkness, the God of life, the God of death. Huh? That's idolatry. That's not so. There's only one God. There's only one creator. He creates everything. So you say, what type of a God do I want that he creates Hitler? Who knows? Who needs a God like that? So the answer to that question is, good question. That's a really good question. But that's the reason that God put us in the world, is in order to eliminate such evil coming from the Creator. So if you just reveal the Creator, then this evil goes away. Because why? Because God creates evil by means of these veils. These veils. And when you reveal godliness, then you realize that the veil and the evil and etc., that's just a creation. It has no real true existence on its own. Its whole existence depends on God being hidden. So he says, how does God create all the bad in the world? That's a division between what's called holy and not holy. This is a masach, a malim, a master, or until it becomes separate, really, like it says, the external forces which say, like we talked about yesterday, Paro said, all of the sustenance of Egypt came from the river. Well, I created the river. And you want to know who created me? I created myself. Ella, but God, the fact of the matter is that even those forces, the woke people or whatever today, that they say there's no God, I created myself, I am God, I call on the shots, the world is just a big dream, in my mind, I everything. Well, God is creating those people also. God, in fact, creates everything and enlivens everything. and they call God the God of gods. They have a feeling that there must be some thing that's creating them. And so therefore, they're not really totally denying God. Either they say that there is God and it's me, right? And where do you come from? I'll ask that question later. So they have an inkling, a feeling that maybe there's something way up there that's creating or created everything, but it's not really relevant. That they say that everything in the world really lives from the kindness and the love of God. In fact, from one world to the other, until it says the level of the God of gods. Like it says, Al bi shamayim kederos. I mean, you can take maybe a good example. You have today let's say the Muslims, right? So the Muslims, they believe in God, but they also believe to kill the Jews. So why in the world would you want to kill the Jews? Well, what's the for? I mean, the Jews, it says in the Torah, the Jews are the sons of God. And they believe that at least one time the Torah was true. So they got an answer. Don't worry about it. They figured out some sort of an answer. So what they're saying is that basically God is like really far away and he doesn't really care what you do. He doesn't care what you do. And they know that it's not so. So they made up their own book that says, no, God says you can do, but he wants you to do what we want to do. And basically all the religions to different degrees are saying that. We believe God exists. I remember in university I learned there were speeches from Hitler, and he said that this is the will of God, this is the divine, right? That we should rule and Germany should rule, this is the will of God. So he believed somewhere up in God, he just believed that God agrees with him, but that he's calling the shots, but somewhere God is up there, just doesn't really care what you do. And so that's what Abraham came to alleviate. And that's one of the reasons why Abraham was hated, because Abraham came to remove false egotism in the world, and people like false egotism. It gives them stability and comfort, identity. I mean, just imagine in one of the Nazi rallies, right? They're over there, and where is it? Nuremberg. They used to make these rallies with like 1 million people, that you get a microphone or whatever, a loudspeaker, and say, you people are going against the will of God. It's one of the 7 commandments of Noah. You're not allowed to kill. Who would listen to you? It would be the same thing as going when the Jews were worshiping the golden calf, right? They go and say, hey, Jews, you're making a big mistake. No one's going to listen to you. It says even with it, they killed Hur, but they tried to go against what the Jews wanted. Okay, so it says, so now there is a division between holy and mundane. It says in mundane, there's also a lot of divisions. There's what's called totally mundane, and that's called Hechos the Noga, the Korolo Elokah de Elokaya. Those are the, like we said before, people that totally go against God, but they know that God exists, but they go against him. That's the lowest levels, we said, right? That God creates the Nazis, this. And then there's another level of creation, another type of a veil, which is not such a thick veil. It's mundane. It's dividing between holy and mundane. But mundane, there's different levels of mundane. This is called Cholin Shenase Al Tarat HaKodesh. There was a thing, their derogatory term for the rabbis, which this was begun by our enemies, the church, is that the rabbis were called the Pharisaites. The Pharisaical means like a person who's like, what do they say, insincere or something like that. It's a derogatory word. But really, the Pharisees, they were called the Perushim. These were people, Perushim, that even mundane things, they treated holy. They were tremendously holy Jews. A lot of them, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, a lot of them had the power to raise the dead. Right? They got the derogatory name because the church is evil and it wanted to go against the rabbis by going in order to change the meaning of the Torah. That's what they wanted to do, to change the meaning of the Torah. But the fact of the matter is these people were very holy, the ones who in the Talmud, they explained the Torah, and they would eat to the degree that they would eat even the regular mundane food, al taharat hakodesh. They would eat even regular food, observing all of the laws of purity and impurity. And there's not that, and before they would eat the food, they would go to the mikveh, they would wash their hands, whatever they would. They were tremendously concerned with making this world holy. That's something like the intermediaries of the holiday, Chul Shamoid. Namely, what did they do? Nimshach ha'ora mikadusha, they would draw down holiness, bechinas bittul, being surrendered to God, also into the mundane. Something like, let's say, keeping Shabbat. And keeping Shabbat. Shabbat shines into all of the days of the week. The days of the week are mundane, but Shabbat has an effect on them. There's a ray of this in the 6 days of the week from the holiness of Shabbat. Some people say that all the days after Shabbat are affected. Here's another way: the 6 days immediately after Shabbat. I'm sorry. The 3 days after Shabbat are affected by the previous Shabbat, and the 3 days before Shabbat, the coming Shabbat, they're affected by the coming days. But that's another way of saying it. That Shabbat affects the 3 days in front of it, and the 3 days before it, and the 3 days afterward, Shabbat. Now, the day of Shabbat is supposed to be a day when not only, when we remember psychologically, when we remember that the world is a creation. And it's not just a creation on Shabbat, it's a creation all the time. Because sometimes you can get so involved in the world, you forget that there's a creator. So Shabbat is the creator's day. Shabbat is the creator's day. That's what happens psychologically. But really what happens is that on Shabbat, there's a special revelation. There's a veil that's removed. There's a revelation of the truth. Suddenly you feel that every day of the week, I am being created. The whole world is being created. It's an amazing, miraculous, dynamic, intricate creation that God is creating every single instant, brand new, with all of the respiratory systems of whatever is protozoa or bug or whatever, and all the stars. It's all being created all the time. Amazing. And on Shabbat, we get a little glimpse of the Creator. Of course, that means that's why there's so many things on Shabbat that are forbidden. There's very few positive commandments on Shabbat. Most of the things on Shabbat is just to appreciate. Don't make fire, don't write, don't do any of these things that might indicate that I'm the creator. I write, I sing, right? There's certain things you can do, something you can't, but the main thing of Shabbat is just to appreciate, like you have a perfect diamond. You appreciate it, right? Okay, so this is drawn to the Jewish people in the 6 days of the week from the holiness of Shabbat, that all of your deeds in the weekday will be like mundane food that was eaten on the purity of holiness. That's the idea of Havdalah. When we make Havdalah, Motzi Shabbat, this is not to separate between Shabbat and the weekdays. This is the opposite. God already separated. This is in order to draw down, to connect, bring the blessing of Shabbat into the weekdays. That's the idea of Havdalah. God says when Shabbat ends, that's it. There's no more revelation of godliness. We make Havdalah in order to continue this effect of the feeling we had on Shabbat, that we're being created. God is the infinite creator. He is the same God that took us out of Egypt. He wants to help us. He cares what we do. He gave us the Torah. God loves us. He enlivens us. He encourages us to take that positive feeling of Shabbat and bring it into the weekdays. Now, by means of this, it says 6 days you should do all of your deeds. But 6 days you're supposed to work, because God created man to fix up the world by means of Helam b'Masach. And the world is there because God separates, so to speak, his revelation from Shabbat into the weekdays. Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol. It separates between holy and mundane. So that's the idea of the world. That's the whole story of creation. That's why we're here. God wanted a place where he would be concealed. So therefore, God made this, so to speak, veils. So he conceals himself from holy to mundane. And within holy, there's also all these different levels. Like it wasn't the holy temple, right? There was a level between the holy of holies and the holy. That if not, if God was purely revealed, so there wouldn't be a world. It would be bittul mamish, like the upper worlds with the angels. God doesn't want a world of angels. The angels don't have to overcome any concealment of God. They don't have to to make the right choices. Angels don't make choices, right? They just appreciate the godliness that they have. They want more. But in this world, we don't appreciate godliness that we have because we don't feel it. And that's the idea of the circumcision. We'll see. This is something like in the day-to-day prayer. There's a prayer that the Jewish people pray 3 times a day. This is called the Shemona Esrei. It's called 18 blessings. 18 blessings. If you count them, there's 19 because the rabbis added one afterwards. When they bow down, like it says, yad, like you're not supposed to lift up your hand in front of the king. Right? You're standing in front of a king. Now, today we don't have any kings. There used to be a thing which was called a king, and the king had like absolute power over the people, and the king was like a different person. It was a different type of a person. A king was a person that ideally didn't make any mistakes. Everything the king said, you had to do, right? He was the ultimate power, the ultimate connection to truth and to the right decisions and etc., right? That's the king. So let's say a person finally gets an audience in front of the king, and he wants to request from the king a gift or something. He wants to request mercy or something from the king, and all of a sudden he notices on the side that a good friend of his is standing that he hasn't seen in a long time. So he's standing in front of Your Majesty, and he looks over to the side and goes like that, or he winks to this guy on the side. Afterwards, the king said, "What was that? What did you just do?" He said, "Oh, nothing, Your Majesty." Off with his head. You don't make signs in front of the king. That's like Shemona Esrei. Shemona Esrei, you're standing in front of the king. You don't think about anything else except for God. He says he makes a sign, Kami Malka, in front of the king. You don't do that. And really it says, Yagia Kapecha Ti Sochal. So if so, that's what it's supposed to be really in the weekdays. In the weekdays, you're supposed to be totally surrendered to God. But 1 second, it says in the Torah that you're supposed to work, the 10th commandments. 6 days you should work, and Shabbat you should rest. So we're supposed to work. So if we're totally negated to God, how are we going to work? It says also, King David said in Psalms, Yagia kapecha ki sochal, that by means of you're supposed to work, and you for your food. Then it says Ashrecha b'tovlach. That's the continuation of the sentence. So you're supposed to work. What does it mean? You're supposed to do the 38 different categories of work in these 6 days of the week. All these things that are forbidden to do on Shabbat, you're supposed to do in the middle of the week, right? Or at least some form of them. Planting and plowing and harvesting, etc. Hainu she'al yadei ha'maisa, by means of your deeds, what you do in the 6 days of the week, you draw down a new level of godliness, a new creation. His avos davar chadash. You make the world brand new, like it says, "A machadish b'tuva of ma'aser bereshis." God is constantly creating the world brand new. That's what it means. Asher bora elokim lasot. So it means that God is creating everything brand new. Everything should be very exciting, very new. We should always feel young and interested. Who knows what's going to happen the next second, right? Everything is very fresh and miraculous. We feel that the whole world is a big gift, but we don't feel this. We don't feel this. And the reason we don't feel it is because we're not working hard enough to remove the concealment. And that's why Jews are created, in order to remove the concealment, that everyone in the world will realize what a big miracle they themselves are. And that every human being also has potential that's not being revealed. And that's why we started off this mimer. We said that that's why in the Midrash it compares the circumcision to termosine, these beans that have to be cooked like 7 times, whatever. You have to fix them up, to remove their bitterness and make them sweet. Or12b, Misha Torah Berev Shabbat, one who makes effort before Shabbat, he will eat on Shabbat. So we have to, God entrusted the world to us that we have to fix it up. How do we have to fix it up? By means of the Torah. The Torah tells us what to do and what not to do. Sheyit aleh call that everything should be feeling Shabbat all the time. Shabbat is what's called menucha. It's rest. Bechin is bittul. It's like being, how do you say, bittul means essentially means healthy. It means doing what you're supposed to do. Bittul means fitting in, right? You have a watch and all the pieces work, then all those pieces, that's bittul. If one of the pieces doesn't work, then it sticks out. That's called egotism. It sticks out, wrecks the whole thing. The same thing, every human being is as a special, unique part to play in the world, even if just to think good thoughts, to say a good word. When you do that, it's like the parts of the watch work, and then everything is wonderful. If not, if there's egotism, then we see what happens. There's war, there's destruction, there's disease, there's famine. I heard, I mean, you can correct me if this is wrong, but I heard that there was a long time in Russia. I don't know how it is now, but in Russia, and that like in the northern cities or whatever, there was no food. There was long lines for bread. But when you went down to the south, like in Bukhara, places that were warmer, there was plenty. You walked in the marketplaces, there was fruits and vegetables and everything. But there was crime, and there was incompetence, and there was the how do you say, the stealing and bribery and the corruption. And so as a result, the trains didn't work, and the buses didn't work, and the trucks didn't work, and the workers didn't work, and this. But there was really plenty, but things weren't flowing. People were thinking about themselves, and as a result, it just made a big clot in the flowing unity. The same thing with the world. Every person is necessary for the flowing health of the world. When people become egotistical, then it stops the whole thing, right? How do they say the dollar stops by me? In one way, that's good if you want to talk about responsibility. Then, okay, put the responsibility on me. I'm not trying to shirk my responsibility. But if you want to say that the whole world is here before me, so I make money, I don't care about giving it to anybody else. That's why we started the classes with charity. Charity is a level of what's called bittul. You don't think about yourself. You flow. You do what you're supposed to do. It's the same thing like charity. The money is really not mine. God just entrusted it to me to give to others. Excuse me. The same thing, everything I have, all of my talents, all of my abilities, it's not really mine. God just entrusted it to me to help others. That's called bittul. You do what you're supposed to do. And that's what Shabbat really is, and that's what Shemona Esrei is. But the purpose of Shabbat is in order that the 6 days of the week, when we do things that might stimulate our false egotism, that even then we do it for the same reason that we felt on Shabbat, because God is creating us. That's like the Shemona Esrei. The Iev Shaliyot Kula Shabbat. It's impossible that there should be only Shabbat. Like impossible, like all the prayers are not all Shemona Esrei. In the beginning, you have to have weekdays. That's the way God created it, that we are here to fix things up. This is the same thing as circumcision. Until Avram was circumcised, his name was Avram. Avram means very, very, means a father. The father is the beginning. He begins the family, the father. This is the beginning of the revelation of godliness. Yesh mi'ayin, that God is creating everything from nothing. Abraham felt it. He was very, very high. He felt the source. Therefore, he's called Av. And he was very, very high. Ram means high. He was elevated on the whole world. Something like Noah. Noah, he built an ark. You want to come in? Come in. Right? When Abraham was very, very high, a higher level, let's say, than Noah was. And he was just as separated from the world as Noah was. But then, because in the time of Abraham, there was still this, Abraham was after Noah, right? Abraham was, I mean, really, they lived like 58 years together. The end of Noah's life, Abraham had just been born. So they had this little time together, but they weren't active together, so to speak. Active together. Noah's active years were before the flood, which was 300 years before Abraham was born. So when Abraham got the circumcision, then Avram was called the father of all mankind. Abraham's only concern was not himself. His concern was fixing up all of mankind. That's the job of the Jews. The job of the Jews is supposed to be educating all mankind. That's today the 7 Noahide commandments. That's what Losif haklalos, his kalos and itzutzos, to raise up all these sparks of meaning of life that are in the world that are not attached to their true purpose. And Abraham is supposed to attach everyone to the God who's creating them. This ha'ora begiloi gomer, that God should be revealed until all of the sparks of meaning, the potential which is inside of every human being and everything in the world, should be included in the rays of God. That's just the kanfei shechina, under the wings of God's revelation. And that was accomplished by means of the milah. Milah revealed godliness in the world. Milah is circumcision, because the word milah is the letters of mal, yud k, the first 2 letters of God's name. Mal means to speak. Yud k is chachma bevina. Mal is revelation. Like mal miloshin mam lala, to speak, speaking. A milah, the word milah means to speak. A word, words are milim. Shadibur, that speech is revelation of one's wisdom to go out of oneself. Elapol u mehahelam elagiloi. Speech, mal, mila, is taking what's concealed and bringing it out. Right? You interrogate somebody. What are you thinking? Who are you? Where you were? I'm not talking. I'm only giving my name and my this, right? And where were you on the night of this? Keeping everything I said. Finally, he gets the person to talk. All of a sudden, everything that was hidden comes out. By Abraham, what was concealed was the oneness of God. He knew what it was, and he wanted to tell everybody about it, but it was not in his ability. He was just Avram. He was very high. But when God gave him the circumcision, he removed this veil, and this veil enabled him to be Avraham, to the father of all nations. Therefore, in the future, it says, God says, Az afoch elamim safa barura. Then I will call, this is from Tzafania or something, then I will call, should look it up. Then I will call on all of the nations. What is this? 1 minute. All right, we'll see. Then I will call, that's right. God says, then I will transform all of the nations, that they will have a clear language. What does it mean, a clear language? That people won't be interested in themselves so much anymore. I want to go to heaven. I am good, I am bad. They'll be interested more in the Creator. Now the reason people are interested in themselves because they don't feel the Creator. There's a big veil. And that's the job of the Jewish people, is this thing of milah. Mal means to speak, that God becomes revealed. We feel God's speech is creating the world. That's what it says in the days of the Moshiach. It says that all flesh will see together that the mouth of God is speaking. Then there will be a revelation of God's speech, revelation of godliness, the revelation of God's chachma, like we said, Yud-K, Mal, Yud-K, God's essence will be revealed in the world, which that's what God wants. I mean, the God is creating the world, and for a godly purpose. That purpose will be felt in every detail in the world by every single human being. So what's the Rebbe saying over here? Abraham's job was to reveal the truth. And the truth is now concealed from us by all these veils. By Abraham revealing his orla, his foreskin, that reveals the truth. Now, you can ask a question, why do you have the orla from there? Take off a part of your nose or something like that. Why specifically from that organ of procreation? So that we're going to talk about, God willing, tomorrow. But meanwhile, what we have to know is that the world, the way it is not exactly the way it's supposed to be, and that what's being concealed from us is reality. Reality. So, and we just have to discover it. But in order to discover it, we have to remove something like, Columbus discovered America, if that's really true. I don't know, whatever. He discovered America. Well, he didn't invent America, but he had to go across the ocean in order to reveal what was there. The same thing, we have to do something in order to reveal the godliness that's really here, that God is creating everybody. And that is what Abraham began in the world. Therefore, Abraham was the first Jew by means of the circumcision. And we'll continue talking about this tomorrow, God willing.